What guitar strings are best for fingerpicking acoustic blues? Today I'm going to talk about what I prefer, along with some things to take into consideration when choosing strings for yourself. But before we get started, I'd like to know what type of guitar strings you're currently using. What brand, what gauge, and what guitar are you using them on? Let me know in the comments. I'll be really interested to find out. So the type of strings that I think are best for fingerpicking acoustic blues are these Elixir strings. These in particular are Elixir Nano Web Phosphor Bronze strings, light gauge. Now I like this Nano Web because that's a thin plastic coating they put over the strings, which allows them to last a lot longer than your normal guitar strings. For me, that's important because I have an aggressive playing style. I like to put a lot of hours on my strings, and this allows me to go longer between string changes. So that's very useful for me as a professional full-time musician. Now, another thing about these strings is they're phosphor bronze strings. So that means they're basically a little bit brighter sounding than normal bronze strings. I prefer that. Some people don't like phosphor bronze strings. You really have to put them on your guitar and see how they sound to find out. Now, the next biggest thing that's going to affect what strings sound best is the guitar that you're putting them on, right? So that's going to cause some major differences in what the strings sound like. The biggest factor, I would say, is going to be the string gauge. You know, light, medium, heavy, extra light. And so if we take, for instance, this guitar here, this is my AJ Advanced Jumbo Gibson guitar. This guitar I like to put light gauge strings on, so 12 through 53 with the Elixirs. It sounds really good. I mostly play this in standard tuning, and it just sounds great. I've put medium gauge strings on this guitar a few times, and it doesn't sound good. It makes the guitar actually sound worse, I would say. So it's interesting how that works. Now, another example for you would be my Resonator guitar. This is my National NRP guitar. And with this guitar, I like to use the medium gauge string. So I use these Elixirs, still Nano Web Phosphor Bronze, but now they're 13 through 56. So these are heavier strings. They're medium gauge strings. And the reason I like them on the Resonator guitar is I like to do a lot of open tunings, so I'm loosening the strings. So when you loosen the strings, I like to have the medium gauge strings on there because it gives me a little more tightness to the strings. To me, the light gauge strings become a little too rubber bandy, a little too loose when I do that, you know, open tuning and slide stuff. So those are some things to keep in mind. I mean, really, you have to try it out for your guitar and see, like, what does your guitar sound like with lights as opposed to mediums, or maybe phosphor bronze versus normal bronze. Now, the next thing you should really take into account is your own personal playing style. So like I mentioned earlier, I like to play pretty aggressively. I use a thumb pick and 2 finger picks most of the time, and that has a certain effect on the strings, and I need a certain tightness and resistance in the strings because I'm hitting them with a certain amount of force. So if you're playing with a very light touch, if you have a very light touch when you're finger picking, you might be able to use, you know, just light strings, or you might even be able to try extra light strings might even work for you. So, you know, I like a certain amount of resistance on my strings when I'm digging in with that picking hand. And so that's important. So for me, like extra light strings, for instance, the problem is I would overpower those strings and I wouldn't be able to get the volume and sound I want to get out of the instrument. But this is a really personal thing. So, you know, for you, it may be totally different than it is for me, but that's one of the most important things to take into consideration is your, you know, playing technique. Now, if you have problems with your left hand or you have arthritis or something in your left hand, you might want to consider, going with the light strings or maybe even trying the extra light strings. Another advantage of the lighter strings is it's easier to press the string down. So it's not as hard to press the string down with your left hand. So that's the advantage. Once again, that disadvantage is just it's going to be a more rubber band-like string. It's going to be looser. Now, we are talking about acoustic guitars specifically here because electric guitars is a whole nother ball game in terms of string gauges. But I hope you found this useful. I think I could talk for a long time about strings because it's probably the most important guitar accessory that there is, and I'll be interested to see in the comments, what strings you're using, what your opinions or thoughts are about this this talk, and I'll see you all real soon. Thanks for tuning in.